Hey everyone, my name's David. I'm the head video editor here at REACHRIGHT, and this video is going to be a little bit different than what we normally upload to the channel, but we like to make content that helps out churches and ministry leaders all the time. So if that's the kind of thing that you're into, I would consider hitting the subscribe button because it really does help notify you every time we release a video that help out people just like you. Now today we're here at my home church, and as you might be able to tell, this is a small to medium-sized church. And if Google is anything to go by, most of you guys watching this probably come from a small to medium-sized church. So I would hope that you can relate to this. But today we're talking about ProPresenter specifically, and we're gonna kind of review how it is for churches and what it's all about. ProPresenter is the software responsible for presenting anything that we want to show during a church service, whether that be worship lyrics or slides or the pastor's scriptures that he's showing, everything that's going on these screens behind me, which we'll get a little bit closer, don't worry. But ProPresenter is the one responsible for showing all of that. Now these screens that do show those worship lyrics and announcement slides and everything, they're really only part of a church presentation or a live stream or whatever you are showing on a Sunday morning. So I'm gonna show you guys everything that we have set up in order to get a true understanding and perspective on the way that we are running things from the audiovisual department. I thought this would be the perfect time to make this kind of video because we are actually right now in transition for a lot of our different equipment in our audiovisual department. So this is kind of one of the last time frames that I can show how we have things set up in a way that I'm assuming a lot of you guys do, which is just cameras running to a switcher with HDMI and then using ProPresenter. That's it. We're about to change all of that, which I'll talk about in a little bit, but this is a really good example to show you guys because you guys might be able to relate to it. All of that being said, ProPresenter really is kind of meant for churches of all sizes, including mega churches that really have their production down to a T with a lot of fancy, complicated setup. And so the way that we do things does work, but we have some workarounds kind of in place. So keep in mind, this is not a video where you should set up your church presentation exactly how we do because we kind of have a lot of workarounds in place. But if anything, it'll just show you the flexibility of what ProPresenter can do no matter what your situation is. So as of right now, when you walk into our sanctuary, we have one camera here, which is responsible for the wide shot for the pastor, okay? This is not the close-up shot, this is just the wide shot so that people can really get a good glance at the stage, the whole worship team, and when our pastor is walking around a lot and getting fidgety, it's really good for capturing all of that. And then as we walk forward, up here off to the side, we also have our close-up shot, okay? So this is exactly how it sounds. This is gonna be for when the pastor is hopefully standing still and we can kind of switch between camera angles. Right now, those are the only two cameras that we really have set up. And then of course, everything else that's going on the screen, like scriptures and worship lyrics, are right above us on these two stage screens, both displaying the exact same thing. We are about to add a confidence monitor in the back, which we'll talk about because ProPresenter can display different things on multiple screens, but we don't have that set up right now. And if we actually go up to the stage, if you join me for a second, we can stand behind the pulpit as if we were speaking as the pastor. And as you can see from their perspective, it's pretty important to have something like a confidence monitor so you can see exactly the scripture that you're referencing, making sure that the audience is following along, but it'll also display timers and everything like that in order to make sure that you are on the ball when it comes to having a good church service. So again, you can tell that my church is definitely nothing fancy. We are small to medium size, and ProPresenter might seem like something that's a little bit of overkill for small to medium sized churches. But honestly, I find that its greatest value is that it's kind of an investment. It's something that you can start to learn now and then grow into. So when you are adding more equipment, like you can see this giant pile of boxes and mess in the back in our AV room, when you add that equipment and you change your audiovisual setup, you're not having to relearn or get some fancy, complicated software because you already know ProPresenter well. So let's take a look at ProPresenter itself and show you what it can do. So I'm gonna show you guys one of our most recent services, being Easter, because it's pretty robust and it's best to just look at an actual example of how a church uses ProPresenter, in my opinion. So if we go to this top left, the first thing that I wanna point out is that you can make playlists specifically for any kind of service that you want. You can see we have Easter, we have Christmas Eve, we have our membership meeting, we have one for a funeral, we have our worship and prayer, which is our secondary service, and we have a standard Sunday morning. And clicking in that playlist now gives us a whole setup, so you don't have to come in here obviously and make something different or manual every single time. And once you have a playlist created, then you can come down here and actually put in order the different items that you want for your service. So we always start with our pre-service and our pre-service slides. Now, something that's been going on since I started this is our slides that we actually have on rotation. So you'll see here, it's actually going to be changing over time. I think we have it at a 10-second interval right now, but this is for the live stream and the people that are here kind of just fellowshipping and talking before service starts. And these just kind of go on a slideshow rotation until we're ready to start service. And what's really nice is we've just kind of added all of the different graphics and videos that we want on here at any time, but we can display them when we want. So we can actually disable things that aren't relevant. So you can see we have this Christmas tree giveaway that's disabled because it's not Christmas time and that event is not relevant right now. And it's not a communion Sunday for us specifically, and we're not doing community lunches right now. So all of those are kind of grayed out, but we can enable them whenever we want and just include them in this rotation that's on this never-ending slideshow. And coming over to our video switcher, you'll see, here's our 2 camera angles, by the way, but this kind of top one is showing what the live stream would see, and you can just see how those graphics are nice and displayed and rotating through. And when you come over here, it will actually show you, we have our stage screens, we have live stream, and you can kind of organize this however you want, but this just kind of helps us see how it's set up and what different people in the house are seeing at different times. Then when it's time to actually start service, we can scroll down and you'll see that we have our announcements and offerings section. This is very similar to our pre-service slides, except these actually aren't going to just move on once we click one. It will stay up there for as long as the person who's doing announcements wants to talk about whatever's on the screen. So the person running ProPresenter can kind of click through these. But I know a lot of churches kind of prepare their broadcast. And so if that's you and you have everything kind of timed out and running really like perfectly, like a well-oiled machine, you can certainly set things up in ProPresenter to run on timers and set certain triggers to happen. A lot of churches will do something where when it's all of a sudden time for worship, and let's say we go down to our worship slide and we click on the first song, as soon as they click on that first slide for those lyrics to pop up, all of a sudden their actual in-house church will change the light and they'll come down or they'll change colors or whatever it may be. And that's all ran through ProPresenter. You can do that in kind of this area down here where it says M, and you can set up macros. My church does not have any macros set up because we don't have our lights integrated with ProPresenter, but those are some of the cool things that ProPresenter can do. And speaking of worship, you'll notice that all of our worship slides right now kind of have this checkerboard blank background, and that's because we like to change through the different backgrounds that you can do. So the person running ProPresenter can obviously go through these slides depending on what part of the song that they're in, but if you come down here, ProPresenter has its own little media bin where you can choose between different backgrounds and foregrounds and things that you can purchase or install yourself. And by doing that, you can switch through these and they will automatically come up as the background, which is really nice because now it's just displaying those words in front of that background. But if I do want to change, let's say in the middle of a song, the look of it, because I don't really like it, or I want something brighter, I can come down here into the media folder, I can click on this, and it will replace the background without changing where we are in the song, which is really nice. Okay, so moving on from worship, if we actually scroll down to the message itself, it's a very similar concept to worship, but we have the background that we want kind of laid out for the whole message. This was Easter, obviously, so we have that kind of purple flowing robe there, and then we have his title, Christ is Risen, and it moves on with all of his scripture that we added. Now, this is 2024, so this probably doesn't come as a surprise to anybody, but we don't have to manually type all of these scriptures out. ProPresenter does have its Bible scripture integration. I've cleared out all his scriptures so you guys can actually see what this would look like, but let's say, this is the middle of the week, we're preparing the message, so it's time to add his scriptures in. All we have to do is go up to the Bible icon here, and then we can use obviously whatever kind of reference we want. So let's say he's doing Genesis 1, since we're already in that, or actually we'll change it so you can see what it really looks like. Let's go Romans. I'm typing with one hand, so it'll take me a second, but we'll go Romans 12, and let's say we're gonna go 1 through 4. Search that. We have the New King James Version loaded on here right now, but we also have these different versions that we can swap between, but we'll stay New King James for now. I can highlight Romans 12, 1 through 4. I'll highlight all of these scriptures. Give me one moment, I only have one hand. There we go. And now that they're all highlighted, something that we can do is actually have our message notes highlighted down here. These slides are highlighted, so now all we have to do is go down to this Save As icon, go to Copy to Selected Presentation, since this is the presentation that's selected. And now that we've clicked that, I can go back to Show, and we'll see it's added all of those scriptures in.
Hey, real quick, as I'm editing this, I realized something I forgot to mention that's pretty important is that ProPresenter can integrate with things like CCLI and Song Select and multi-track. So if your church uses any of those different types of services and platforms, it's going to be extremely easy to add songs on the fly. And if you're into that kind of automation thing, or if your worship team listens to the multi-tracks with the correct BPM click tracks and they actually just kind of stay on beat with the song, you can actually integrate it to have those worship slides be controlled on a timer. And so you never have to worry about any kind of like volunteer getting confused or missing their cue or not having the right words up at the right time. It's really nice for that. The expansive integration that ProPresenter has with some of the most commonly used services for churches is definitely one of its best features. Just thought I'd stop and say that. Now let's continue on.
Now, just like many of you guys, our in-person service isn't the only thing going on. We do have our live stream running at the same time, which ProPresenter is also responsible for displaying everything. But our live stream, we kind of wanted to display different things than what people in real life are seeing sometimes. This is kind of one of the perfect examples that I'll show you, and we are doing a little bit of a workaround, but it might actually apply to your church. So again, I'm out in the sanctuary, and as you can see, we have our close-up camera here. Our wide angle shot is right in the middle of the aisle there. As soon as my camera refocuses, there it is. And right now I have this scripture up for reference. So imagine that this whole sanctuary is filled with people, and we have our pastor preaching here on this scripture right now. And these cameras are currently recording the live stream. Taking a look at what this looks like and the way that we have it set up, we actually have both of those cameras connected to this video switcher, which is why when we look at it, you can actually see both the camera angles here. And right now I have the close-up selected. I can switch between those right now, but the live stream is seeing whatever I choose. Now you can see that that scripture that's out on the screens shows up differently for the live stream. How do we do that? Well, if we come over here, the way that we currently have it set up is it tells us that our stage screens look like that, while our live stream screen looks like this giant square of green, which is actually a green screen alpha channel that we key out on our switcher, which is why it's just completely keyed out, and then we basically have the camera as the background. And that's something you can actually set up by going up here into screens, and you can see these are kind of intended to be set up as those confidence monitors that we talked about at the beginning of the video, but we currently have set up a couple different looks that we can switch between. We have our live stream, which is now selected at lower third, and we can switch at any time to our full screen slide if we would want them to see exactly how the in-person audience is seen. But right now we have this selected for the live stream, and then we have the stage screens selected to the full screen. So since these are both toggled as different settings, we can actually have them display different things at the exact same time. Similar to all these different videos and graphics that you can load in to kind of be backgrounds or foregrounds or whatever you want to set up in ProPresenter, you can also actually add its own little audio music library. This is really nice because instead of kind of fuddling around with Spotify or the in-house music or whatever it is, I just currently have all of these kind of different pads that are instrumental that I can switch between when the pastor is really kind of getting into an emotional part of the message, or we're just having that fellowship, pre-service, whatever it may be. I can kind of choose between these whenever I want. And if you want to clear them out, you can clear out the music just by clicking this music note up here in the top right. Or you can clear everything all at once just with this X button. But it kind of lets you choose what you want to clear out. The point that I'm trying to make is that you can kind of install everything that you want into ProPresenter as its own hard drive almost. So the videos live here, the music lives here, whatever you want lives here. Because when you actually install those or import them onto your PC rather, it is creating a copy that ProPresenter will pull from basically its own database, which is really nice in case anything were to happen, like a file goes corrupt or deleted or something on your actual PC. ProPresenter has its copy so that it doesn't need to mess around. Just for example, if I go up to this membership playlist meeting, which I'm probably going to blur some portions out because there's sensitive information there, but just at the very top of this, what I'm trying to show you is that we have this video loaded on that we actually wanted to show people, and it was created in ProPresenter as its own copy, so I don't have to worry about where it's pulling from on the actual PC, which is great. And you can really get crazy with the way that you present things. If I go into Bible and I go up into options, you can see that not only can we go through the different translations, but the slide options, we kind of have a theme that is already built in, ready to go for however we want things displayed. But if I ever wanted to change that, I can go in here and all of these different things that are in here that you're seeing, I didn't create any of these. These were preset and built into ProPresenter. You have countdowns, you have different cutouts, you have different styles and different alignments and fonts and everything like that, which can all be not only selected as a template, but then additionally, you can modify them and edit them manually after you pick them too. So there's really a high level of customization in ProPresenter to a lot of different ends, but we're using it very simply right now, and I think a lot of small churches are. So again, this is not how you would set up your audiovisual ideally in your church, which is why we have all of this different equipment change. But just to give you guys an idea, we actually have this PC running ProPresenter. We have one HDMI coming out of it, which is being ran to this HDMI splitter underneath the table right there. And that splitter is responsible for displaying to the two screens out on our stage. So that's why both those screens out on the stage are showing the exact same thing. And then we have additional signal running from the PC right into our switcher itself. Something we're moving to towards the future is actually getting our PTZ cameras and running everything off SDI, which is why we have this card installed right now. And this is something that I would highly recommend every church does. This is gonna make it so that every single output you see there is an SDI output. We can have a confidence monitor, we can have those two screens out on stage, we can have a TV in the lobby, and all of it can be ran by ProPresenter, displaying a different thing to every single screen. So that is definitely something that we're moving to towards the future, but the point is ProPresenter can handle all of it. This is why I wanted to do this video here, because we have a lot of different like band-aid solutions and workarounds that we're using with ProPresenter right now, and it's kind of a really simplified setup with DSLRs going into a switcher, and we're barely using ProPresenter to its max potential, and we have this kind of like excuse our mess back here in the AV room, just all this chaos. But truthfully, I feel like a lot of churches may be in that similar boat. But the best part about ProPresenter is all of these different changes that we're making and the things that we are planning to grow into. You can see all of it back there. ProPresenter is going to be able to handle that. Now, a lot of different mega churches might have crazy stage displays with different like foam cutouts and PVC pipes running everywhere, and they will actually display their projectors onto them to map specifically to different areas on the stage. ProPresenter can handle that too. I've never personally messed with that, which is why I'm not showing you how to do it, but I do know that ProPresenter is designed for churches in every different situation, no matter how small and simple you are or how large and complicated your broadcasting gets. So yeah, with all of that being said, no matter what your situation is or what your church looks like, ProPresenter really does always seem like the best option. So is there any flaws? Is there any reason people wouldn't get ProPresenter? I do have a few thoughts on that. Number one, it is most definitely the most expensive option out there for presentation software. It's not going to be in the budget for a lot of churches, and a lot of churches don't necessarily care about the presentation or all of the different complicated features that ProPresenter offers. And so if that's you, I know that budget is a real thing that we all work with churches, and you might consider a different option in that case. Another thing is, despite what the tutorials might tell you, I know from personal experience, serving on the AV team and trying to train people, that ProPresenter is not necessarily the most intuitive. It can do anything you want it to do, but knowing how to get it to do anything you want it to do is kind of another story. Most of us work with volunteers that are only there for a couple of minutes really before service starts to learn something on AV, or they're not available to come in during the middle of the week. I know how it is at a small to medium-sized church, and so teaching people ProPresenter isn't always the easiest thing. That's kind of another flaw I have for it. As flawless as ProPresenter might be in execution, I do have to be honest, and I've heard other churches say this as well, even churches much larger than us, ProPresenter does crash occasionally. And it doesn't really matter if your system, whether it's a PC or a Mac or anything like that, it doesn't matter how robust it is. A lot of times ProPresenter as a software just kind of crashes. Now, it's not consistent. I wouldn't say it happens every Sunday or even every month for that matter, but it does seem to happen when we least expect it and in those really crucial moments. It's usually as simple as just restarting the program and everything's fine. People are understanding. At worst, they just kind of see a blue screen up on the screens for a second. But if you are the type of church that really doesn't ever want the software to crash, I can't say that ProPresenter is bulletproof in that matter. But really, those are three, I think, pretty minor things, other than maybe the budget is kind of the most complicated reason or justification, as I would put it, as why you would not get ProPresenter. But other than that, I just think it's the best option. So if I had to review ProPresenter a 1 out of 10, I'd definitely give it probably a 9 out of 10. ProPresenter is the best option out there if you can afford it, and I highly recommend getting it. But if you want to know about other options for presentation softwares for churches, we got just the video for you. Make sure to check it out.